Hi guys, Shishir here. Welcome to this new module, Building Blocks of Active Directory. AD is a complicated, however, a very robust system. We went through the Active Directory consoles in the earlier modules like directory services, users and computers, Active Directory sites and services, and Active Directory domains. But those were just the front end of Active Directory. This module will explain the deep end of Active Directory and will provide you a clear understanding of how Active Directory is built. The information will deepen your understanding and will be helpful in troubleshooting Active Directory when needed, and it will also be very helpful during your interviews because a lot of things which I am going to explain in this module are some things which are asked during the interviews. So here is what we are going to cover in this module. Where is Active Directory stored? The Active Directory database. The Active Directory partitions. So Active Directory is broken into three separate parts. And what are those partitions? I will also tell you an amazing tool which is ADSI edit. This is a tool which you use to do some good troubleshooting with Active Directory when you have to make changes at the attribute level. Once you understand partitions, ADSI edit will make more sense. I'll also tell you about Sysvol. And I will introduce you to the FSMO roles. These are the favorite questions when you are giving an interview regarding Active Directory. And they are for a reason because they are very important. Anybody who claims that he knows Active Directory should know FSMO roles. So where is Active Directory stored? Active Directory is also a database which stores information. The Active Directory is stored in a file called as ntds.dit. All domain controller in a forest or a domain have a local copy of this file or this database. The local copy of each domain controller is replicated to each other and kept in sync with other domain controllers with the help of a process called as Active Directory replication or AD replication. So Active Directory is ultimately what? It stores your users, computers, other configurational items. So it is a database. And like any database, it also has a file. Ultimately, database is stored in a file. The name of that file is called ntds.dit. And every domain controller has a local copy of this file inside it. I think it's C Windows System folder where you have ntds.dit. Remember when we were promoting Active Directory or when you were promoting the domain controller, the first domain controller, you would have noticed that it asked you to provide certain paths. It gave the default path of C Windows System 32 somewhere, and we would have chosen that. But we also had an option at that time to change the path to somewhere else. So that's the path of the ntds.dit file. I'm going to quickly take you to the domain controller and I'm going to show you the ntds.dit file. But before I go there, let me again tell you that this file, there is a local copy of this file on each domain controller, and this file is kept in sync with all the other domain controllers in the local domain as well as in the forest via a process which is called as Active Directory replication. So once again, I am in my Azure portal and I will go to my PDC and I will start this machine. I also want to tell you something interesting if you haven't figured it out already by now. So what I do every time when I boot up these machines is I get a new IP address here. Okay, so I copy this IP address and I put it in my remote desktop window and I connect to that IP address. See, this is the IP address today. Actually, what I can do is that I can also configure a DNS name here. So and the full name of this thing will become pdc.azureeast.cloudapp.azure.com, and most likely it's not available. Okay, it can be only lowercase. It's checking. Okay, I got it. That's amazing. So I'm gonna save it. And why I keep it like a dynamic public IP address and not static is because I believe that you have to pay additional if you go for a static IP address, but the dynamic IP address with the machine is free. So that is why I leave it to dynamic. Okay. So PDC is up, and I configured a DNS name. So what I'm going to do today is, instead of using the IP address, I'm going to put the DNS name. The benefit of this is going to be that I know it gets changed every now and then. The IP address gets changed whenever I reboot my Alright, so the DNS name is updated here. What I'm going to do, I'll copy it, and now I'm going to paste it to my PDC. This way, every time I deallocate the machine and reallocate it, I don't have to come here and update the IP address, because no matter what IP address it gets, this DNS will keeps getting updated. So that solves my one problem of trying to go to the IP address and updating the IP address every time when I want to connect to the server. Okay, so I'll go to C, Windows, System 32, NTDS. Yep. So yeah, C Windows System 32 NTDS.dat. So this file is available here. NTDS.dat, this is your Active Directory database. This is where all the information which you see, the Active Directory users and computers snap in, all the users which you created there, the Active Directory sites and services, all that information is getting stored here. All right. So there has been no situation in my life where I have to rebuild this database or fix this database or do anything with this database file directly. So I hope that in your working life as well, you will not have that situation, especially now that we are moving away a lot from these physical things and going into cloud. So your access is getting reduced a lot to the any real work which you can do on the server. But I never got a reason to do this. All the troubleshooting which you do on Active Directory, that happens with the snap-ins and PowerShells and command prompts and the GUIs which are available to you. You don't go at the file level. But having said that, I just wanted to show you the database file, and it is a good question which gets asked during the interviews, that what is the database file of Active Directory, and the answer to that is ntds.dat. All right, let's go back to the training. So now that we have seen the Active Directory database file ntds.dat, let's move on to the next section. This section is about Active Directory partitions which are available in AD. So I told you that Active Directory is divided into three partitions. 1, 2, 3. This is just a photo. This is not Active Directory. So what are these three partitions? Active Directory consists of three partitions, namely domain partition, configuration partition, and schema partition. So let's begin by the definitions of these partitions. Now I'll try to explain what these partitions contain. Domain partition contains the directory objects such as users and computers associated with the local domain. Okay. A domain can have multiple domain controllers. A forest can have multiple domains. All right. So a domain partition is local to a domain, and the domain partition actually contains the real information of user accounts and the groups and the computers and all those things which get created in a domain. Remember, forest is the circle and multiple triangle inside it as are the domain, the parent domain, the child domain, but each individual triangle was a domain. So the domain partition specifically contains the information of the users and computers and the printers and other LDAP resources and the groups of that domain. Nothing else. That's what is the domain partition. Configuration partition contains the replication topology and other configuration data that must be replicated throughout the forest. And every domain controller in forest has a replica of same configuration partition. So configuration partition contains various information such as replication topology, also the exchange information. When we will install exchange server, I will show you that where the information of exchange server gets stored in Active Directory, and that is stored in configuration partition. Lot of things regarding the configuration of the Active Directory. The sites which you have seen, Active Directory sites and services, that gets stored in configuration partition. So in terms of the snap-ins which we have looked at, Active Directory sites and services get stored in the configuration partition. Active Directory domains probably get stored here, or it has got relationships in all three partitions actually. Directory services, users and computers, that gets stored, all that information gets stored in the domain partition. So configuration partition, as the name suggests, is mostly the configuration which is common forest wide. And this partition is getting replicated to all the triangles inside that circle, which we call forest. So all the sister domains and all the parent-child domains and which are inside one big circle or one big forest are going to share the same configuration partition. Okay, what's the schema partition? Schema partition contains the class schema and attribute objects that define the type of objects that can exist in a forest. Now this might seem very complicated, especially to the people who hate programming. But unfortunately guys, everything is made up of programming. People write some kind of a code or a program, and that's how you actually get an application which you can support. So look at all the users which are getting created in Active Directory. Look at all the computer objects which are getting created. Look at all the groups which got created. I took you through so many attributes which you can define in a user account. You can put the user account name, you can put user account address, you can put SAM account name, you can put a telephone number, you can even put a picture of a user in an Active Directory user account. So all these things, how are they, like, who designed that a user is going to have all these options to populate all that information? So user ultimately was a class. Those of you who are familiar with object-oriented programming, they would know that there is a concept called as class and the objects of those classes. So you define everything in a class, and then you create multiple objects of those classes which have the same attributes and functions which are available in the class, and you can use these objects for various functionality within your program, and that's what is object-oriented programming, or OOPS. So ultimately, Active Directory is made up of a very complex program written in some kind of a code, which I don't know, like which programming language or whatever. But ultimately, a user, when somebody thought that I will make a user account, he would have created a class. And in that class, certain attributes were defined, certain functions were defined. And all the users which you are ultimately creating today, they are an object of that same class. So basically, a class is like a die. You know, when you have to create some kind of a plastic object uh, like a cup or any plastic object, or a plastic water bottle which you maybe see around you, I can see one, that's why I'm saying, or the cap of this water bottle. So how does somebody make it? They create a mold in which they can put the molten plastic, and then the molten plastic basically becomes solid, and then you get the object. So the mold is a class, and the output which you get out of it, the each bottle cap which I am getting, or each bottle which I am getting, that is the object of that class. Similarly, in Active Directory, all the things which we are creating, whether we are creating an organizational unit or whether we are creating a user account or whether we are creating a group, there is a class present for each and every one of those things. And when Active Directory progresses, like when you go from Active Directory 2003 to 2008 or Active Directory 2008 to Server 2012 Active Directory, there are new features in Active Directory coming in every new release of the new server operating system. And then these new features comes as new classes which get included, new possibilities, new objects, or the old classes which only had, let's say, the user class in Server 2003 can only had one telephone number field update in it. So you can only save one telephone number for the user there and one email address field. But by 2012, they felt that a user carries a mobile phone as well as a landline phone or a PSTN phone. So there should be a place to put two telephone numbers. So maybe in Active Directory 2012, they updated the class to have two attributes in it, one for the mobile phone number and one for the landline phone number. And now, after going to the level of Server 2012 Active Directory, you can create user accounts which can have a place to put two telephone numbers in it. So that's what is schema partition. Schema partition contains the class schema and attribute schema objects that can define the type of objects that can exist in forest. So in your schema partition, you have those classes which you are using in your domain partition and configuration partition to create objects from. So these are all the mold or the die cast which are available in schema partition. Okay. Now I'm going to show you how to access these three partitions. So in this sections, we are quickly going to run through my favorite tool, ADSI Edit, to show you how you can view and access all the partitions that we just discussed via the tool. Right, so let's go to our domain controller and then we open our favorite window, run, and then we go here. Okay, so by default, yeah, just seeing if I can close it, but by default it came open, or let me close it. I'll just close it once more. And okay, lucky for us, the root partition, the domain partition, this is the domain partition, default naming context is the domain partition, is already coming open when I'm trying to open ADSI Edit. So just to give you a bit of a context, I will open Active Directory users and computers along with it. dsa.msc. Look here. This is the exact replica of Active Directory users and computers. The first container is built in, the first container is built in. The second container is business computers, the second OU is business computers. So this was an OU, you can see the book here. Here as well, you can see OU equals to business computers. So this is a more complicated way of showing the easy things which you see here. And most likely in a level 1 kind of a job, you will never come to ADSI Edit because most of your job will be done easily from here, from Active Directory users and computers. You see, you have sales inside it, I have sales inside it. Everything is like that. The benefit is that when you do something from here, you get the attribute level access of the properties. And these are a lot of properties which are not being set, not being used, and you usually don't have to come here and do any kind of a work because mostly you can do your jobs from here. But sometimes when you have to do a troubleshooting to which you're not getting the access of a particular property or an object from here, then ADSI Edit is helpful. All right. So you basically do a lot of things from here, a lot of attributes, and you can filter the values, show only attributes which are mandatory, show the optional attributes, show only the attributes which have value. So you only see the stuff which has value. See, only so little of them have a value. Most of the attributes are blank right now. And you really don't have to go into the details of all these attributes and fix them up or do anything with them. In most cases, you are not going to touch them. It's only when you are troubleshooting something, and then you will know. In a lot of articles, you will see that it will refer you. And when I say articles, I mean Microsoft articles or any other Google search which you are going to do. They'll tell you that open the object in ADSI edit and go to its property and update its attributes. So in those cases, you will come to this place and you will just go ahead and update the attribute of this object. And be very careful while updating the attribute, because if you don't know what you are doing, you can screw up the things big time. So okay, so this is the domain partition. Now let's connect to the configuration partition. This is here. Alright, so this is the configuration partition, and this name is called as the distinguished name, and every object in Active Directory will have a distinguished name. And when I say every object, literally everything is an object. This is an object, this is an object, this is an object, this is an object, this is an object. The group, if there is a group, this is an object. Everything is an object. Alright, so every object will have a distinguished name, and if you want to find out the distinguished name of any object, the easiest thing is that you go to the properties attribute of this object and you look for distinguished name, and you get the distinguished name. Although you can guess it yourself, because after a while you would remember that you write it like this. You write it backwards: dc equals to com, dc equals to root domain, which is the domain name.com, then cn equals to configuration, that is your configuration partition, then cn equals to display specifier because it's a container, and then cn equals to 40b. But it's quite possible that you might make an error in this. So it's always, if you want to refer a particular object via its distinguished name, and usually you will do that when you're writing some kind of a script to do some automation and you have to update a particular object, then you can access the distinguished name like this. Okay, so it even talks about the partitions which are there, the domain partition, configuration partition. So this is all configuration. These are not the real partitions. It is talking about the partitions here. The real partitions are this one, this one. These are the partitions. Sites is a configurational item, and it is common across the forest. The Active Directory sites which you create, they are not local to your domain. They will be visible in the other domains of your forest as well, and hence it is in configuration partition, because the domain partition gets replicated only within the domain. So all the domain controllers within that triangle will have the same domain partition. They will have the same OUs, same structure, same users, everything same. And they will also have the same configuration partition. Whereas all the triangles in the circle, which is the forest, and the triangle represent the domain, or will have different domain partition, because every triangle represents a company, and every company will have different user accounts in them. But they will have the same configuration partition. So if you go to the configuration partition of any domain controller or domain in a forest, you will see exactly the same things. The site names will be similar. These are the sites which we created in AD sites and services. So that's what the configuration partition. Now, schema partition. Okay. This is one partition where you will almost never ever come, because you almost never need to go to the properties of a schema class and change the attribute or update a value or stuff like that, because remember, these are the molds or the dies which you use to create objects. So you don't come here and fix these molds at any time. Like, mostly you will never do it. So Nobody usually asks much about it, but you need to understand that schema is the collection of classes and attributes which you actually use in these two partitions to create the objects. So this is a schema partition I wanted to show you, but don't ever come here and right click and delete stuff and do anything like that, because that'll be stupid. So you almost never touch it. Okay. So this was ADSI edit. I also want to use this opportunity to tell you something else. When you went to partitions here, you saw that you have the configuration partition and the domain partition and the schema partition. These are the three partitions which I spoke about. There is also something called as a forest DNS zone and domain DNS zone. Just to give you a little bit of a context, I will open the DNS here. The default DNS which got installed, if you remember, this yahoo.com is something which I created, so I'll just go ahead and delete it. But this msdcs underscore rootdomain.com and rootdomain.com, these are the two zones which got created by themselves when I promoted my first domain controller. And that's like a configurational thing which happened. These DNS also are stored, these two are also stored as Active Directory partitions within the ntds.dit. So all these things or everything which you see here is stored inside that ntds.dit file. See Windows system ntds.dit file. Everything is getting stored in that database. Now, these two DNS zones, when they were created, they also got stored in ntds.dit, and they got stored as forest DNS zone and domain DNS zones. So ideally, when somebody asks you in an interview that how many partitions Active Directory have, it only has 3 partitions. But to help facilitate a same kind of a DNS on all the domain controllers, because what we want is that all domain controllers, if you delete a record from here, it should get deleted from all the other domain controllers as well. We want to have a same looking DNS in all domain controllers. So in order to keep that configuration common, these two zones also get stored in Active Directory, and they get stored as forest DNS zones and domain DNS zones. And the benefit of storing them like this is that the information of these zones gets replicated to other domain controllers, and by the virtue of that, the DNS on all domain controllers looks alike. So when you are going to promote your second domain controller, you will see that if you delete a record from here or if you create a record here, it also gets created on the other domain controller. And that happens because these partitions will get replicated. Now, in the same example, if you go ahead and create a new zone here, say yahoo.com or something, I'll not go through the same process again. So if you create a new zone here, say yahoo.com, that will not get replicated to the other domain controller by default, because the replication is only happening for domain DNS zone and forest DNS zone, and that's just a name given to them. These two zones get replicated to the other domain controller. And once again, the forest DNS zone get replicated to all the domain, that is all the triangles within that circle. And whereas the domain DNS zone get replicated only to the local domain, only to the domain controllers within your triangle, within your company. Triangle is the company, circle is the group of company. So just imagine any big company that you know of in the world, and every small company within themselves is a company, is a triangle, and the whole circle represents the group. I already showed you that example during the domains and trust videos, so I hope you remember from there, and you are getting the hang of the concept of domains and forests now. Alright, so like I said, that if you are asked that how many partitions are there, technically there are 3 partitions, but if somebody really push you, then you can also say that yes, there is forest DNS zone and domain DNS zone, and those are these 2. Alright, move on. So I just did a demo of ADSI edit. Now the next topic is, what is Sysvol? AD, like any other database, is all about the configuration and the data within that configuration. Configuration can be considered as the basic layout or the blueprint, whereas the data is the actual data which resides inside that blueprint. So it is the layout or the blueprint which resides in ntds.dat database. But the data for Active Directory resides on a folder which is again present on all domain controllers, and it is called as Sysvol. And like ntds.dat file is kept in synchronization between all domain controllers using AD replication, the Sysvol folder contents are also kept in sync between all domain controllers using the process called as file replication. So let's look at the Google definition of Sysvol. The term Sysvol refers to a set of files and folders that reside on the local hard disk of each domain controller in a domain. These are not a forest-wide replication which I am talking about anymore. The Sysvol is local to a domain, to a triangle within the circle. So the term Sysvol refers to the set of files and folders that reside on a local network hard disk of each domain controller in a domain, and they get replicated by file replication service. So the service which replicates the Sysvol is called as FRS, or file replication service. Network clients also access the content of Sysvol tree by using netlogon and Sysvol shared folders. So the client on the network, which is your client PC or any other member server which you have in domain, can access the content of the Sysvol folder. How do you access the content of a folder which is on a computer? By sharing that folder and then accessing the folder by doing a // or as I like to call it, // the name of the server / name of the share, and you get the folder. That's how you set up the network drives. So the network client accesses the content of Sysvol tree by using the netlogon and Sysvol shared folders. Now let's quickly do a demo of Sysvol as well. I'll close all this. And the path of the Sysvol folder was also asked from you when you were promoting your domain controller. By default, it goes to C Windows Sysvol. Alright, so this is the Sysvol folder. And inside Sysvol folder, this is a structure which you will always see. There is a folder which is called as domain. Inside you have got policies and scripts. These policies are group policies. We will talk about group policies in a later part of the training. At that time, I will come back here and tell you what this is about. And so you have the first folder called as domain. You have got staging. You have got staging areas. You have got Sysvol folder again. Okay. These are called as junction point, because technically what's happening is that when you go to domain, you reach policies and scripts. When you go to Sysvol and you click on this, you will also reach policies and scripts. Technically, this folder is a shortcut pointing towards here. These are called as junction points. Now, junction point of Sysvol is a topic in itself, and you can Google it and read about it and the significance of it. It's a huge topic. And when it breaks, problems start happening in your Active Directory domain. And unlike the rest of the things which I told you that I have never had to do, this is something which I had to do quite often. Okay, these folders inside Sysvol, they are following a particular structure, and that's been defined. Domain and Sysvol basically goes to the same destination, that is policies and scripts. And this staging and staging area, these are folders created for the purpose of the file replication, the process which is replicating this Sysvol folder between all the domain controllers so that the content within the Sysvol remains the same. Once again, when we promote additional domain controller, then I will show you that when you create a folder inside here or a file inside here, how quickly it gets replicated to the other domain controller. So that will show you what is file replication and give you a better hang. But for that replication to work, it has to copy the files to the other server and then build the file over there. So the staging and staging areas, as the name suggests, is the staging area. Basically the initial place where the file come in and then get reassembled before going into the policies and scripts folder. So these are all technical folders which you need for this functionality to work, and these folders should be maintained in the same way. Nobody should come here and right click and delete this folder, because if you do something like that, you are going to break the functionality of a domain controller. Having said that, nobody get access to these folders except a domain administrator or somebody who is senior in Active Directory. So a chance of somebody doing this is, or right clicking and doing delete, is very rare. One more thing which you need to understand, let me go to the command prompt, and this is a good command which you should know, net share. If you want to know that what all shared folder exists on a computer, net share is the command. So the shared folder on this computer is the C drive and the D drive. So by default, the drives are shared always. It's just that they are a hidden share. By hidden share, they are shared with the name $. So when you want to access the C drive of this computer, so let me show you. So what is the server? PDC. Ideally, what happened? As soon as I did PDC, I got to see that there are two shares on this, Sysvol and netlogon. These are these two shares. And what is the path of these shares? C Windows Sysvol, Sysvol rootdomain.com scripts is the netlogon folder. So which one is the netlogon folder? Basically, this folder is the netlogon folder. Let me show you. I'll create a folder here, and you will see the folder here. Netlogon refers to the script folder. And this is all a predefined structure which is needed for Active Directory to function. So you need to remember that this is how the structure is supposed to be, or at least needs to understand that this is important, because when ultimately someday this gets broken, you can do a lot of Google troubleshooting and you can run into articles which are going to tell you this structure and you can rebuild this structure. But the important thing is that you understand that this structure is there and it is important to have this structure. Okay. The other share which is there is Sysvol. So what is Sysvol? C Windows Sysvol. Sysvol is the structure. So C Windows Sysvol Sysvol. Okay. Rootdomain.com. Rootdomain.com. Also remember this command. Net share is a very important command in a lot of troubleshooting. Not only for Sysvol troubleshooting. You just want to know what are the shares on a computer. Net share is the command which you run. Okay. So that's how the Sysvol functions, and this is what Sysvol is. And when we do group policies, you will get a better hang of why we need the Sysvol and the significance of Sysvol. But for now, you have to understand and you have to absorb the information as is. All right. Okay, so that was the Sysvol. The next module which we have is very important because it gets asked so much during the interviews, and it is called as FSMO roles. What is the full form of FSMO roles? Flexible Single Master Operation Role. Technically, Active Directory has a lot of roles, a lot of things which Active Directory has to do. And there are multiple domain controllers in a typical Active Directory. So what we do is we give certain roles to certain domain controllers. And those roles are called as FSMO roles. And all these roles comes with certain set of responsibilities. So there are 5 FSMO roles which we are going to study in this module. So there are in total 5 only, there is not more than that. And we will understand what is the name of each role and what is the purpose of each role. If a person wants to prove that he knows Active Directory, I believe he will begin with FSMO roles. Having said that, for the same reason, FSMO role question for sure almost in any AD interview. So these are really important in Active Directory and far more important for clearing an Active Directory interview. So let's begin with them. Define FSMO. FSMO or FSMO or Flexible Single Master Operation Role is a specialized domain controller set of tasks used where standard data transfer and update methods are inadequate. AD normally relies on multiple peer DCs, each with a copy of AD database ntds.dit, being synchronized by a multi-master replication, AD replication. Okay, once again, this definition is not very amazing, but basically there are multiple domain controllers. All of them are getting replicated to each other via the processes of ntds.dit by AD replication and Sysvol by file replication. So there are so many domain controllers, but in order to maintain a law and order between these domain controllers and certain things which they have to do, there are certain tasks and roles which are defined. What is the process of maintaining a peace or a decorum in a group of people or in a country? We elect a government, we get certain people responsible for certain things, and rest of the people follow their advice. That's how a group or a country functions. Similarly, in Active Directory, if you make all the domain controllers exactly equal, everybody would start following their own rules, and that's not how we want it to be. So that is why FSMO roles are important, so that we can designate, okay, for these things we are going to come to domain controller 1, for these things we will go to domain controller 2, and these domain controllers at least know themselves that whom they have to ask for assistance when they are in a certain situation. So these things are defined by FSMO roles. There are 5 FSMO roles. The name of these roles is PDC emulator, domain naming master, read master or related ID master, infrastructure master, and schema master. Once again, like I told you, that we have got 3 partitions: domain partitions and configuration partition and schema partition. Now, configuration and schema partitions are common within the forest. That is, these 2 partitions are replicated to all the domain controllers, that is, all the domain controllers and all the triangles within the circle. Whereas, the domain wide or the domain partition, which contains the user accounts, the computer accounts, only get replicated to the single triangle, all the domain controllers within a triangle or a company. So the FSMO roles are also divided into 2 categories. 2 of the FSMO roles, which is schema master and domain naming master, they are forest wide roles. That means in a forest, in a group of companies, there can only be one domain controller which has schema master role and one domain controller which can have domain naming master role. Now remember, all these roles can remain on a single server as well. So it could be one domain controller which has both the schema master and domain naming master role. But every triangle in a company will not have a domain naming master and schema master. Whereas there is a domain wide roles, which means that every triangle will have a domain controller with read master, with PDC master, and with infrastructure master role. Going back to the definition, every forest can have only one DC, which can be any domain in this forest have these roles. Every domain within a forest has its local copy of this role. Okay, so now let's talk about the forest-wide FSMO roles. The forest-wide FSMO role is domain naming master. FSMO role owner is the DC responsible for making the changes to the forest-wide domain namespace of directory in partition container. This DC is the only one that can add, remove a domain or application naming context from the directory. Okay. So in short, the role of domain naming master is that in your forest, if you are bringing up a new domain, whether it is a sister domain, whether it is a parent-child domain, or whether it is whatever domain, at that time domain naming master role needs to be available. Because when you are bringing out a new name, let's say that your company was group.com, and now you want to bring a new domain in the forest called as india.group.com. So the time at which you are promoting the first domain controller of the india.group.com domain, at that time, this domain naming master FSMO role owner domain controller in the group.com domain needs to be available. You cannot keep it off. It needs to be reachable. Because this is the guy who is responsible to maintain a database which tells that what all naming context or what all domain names are available in this forest. If it is not available, then you will not be able to promote a new domain at that time until you fix the situation. Now, having said that, what will happen if it becomes unavailable? A new AD domain cannot be brought up in the forest, or an old AD domain cannot be removed from a forest. Quite honestly, you don't bring up Active Directory new domain every day in a forest. Okay, the company where you are going to work, they are not going to create a new Active Directory domain every month, because an Active Directory domain is a representation of a company. Do you think, or have you seen any company which is that fast that every month they are setting up a new company? No, it takes ages to build one company. Similarly, the domains are not created every day. So, quite honestly, as far as domain naming master role is concerned, even if it remains dead throughout your tenure of 3-5 years with a company, probably you will not even find out that it is not existent. So, the domain controller, which has the domain naming master role, if you turn it off for some reason, maybe you will have other issues because of that domain controller being missing, or it unable to authenticate the local clients around it, or whatever. But as far as the FSMO role is concerned, you will not have any bother because of that. Schema master. Schema master role is a domain controller responsible for performing updates to the directory schema. The domain controller is the only one that can process updates to the directory schema. Once schema update is completed, it is replicated to the schema master FSMO role to all other DCs in the directory. Remember I told about schema to you, the schema partition, which basically contains the classes and the attributes which are present in Active Directory. So once again, the schema doesn't get updated every day, but let's say that you are running domain controllers version 2003 in your environment, and you want to bring a new domain controller version 2008 in your environment, or you are running domain controller version server 2008 in your environment, and you want to bring a new domain controller server 2012 in the environment. Now when the server 2012 domain controller comes in, it can coexist with server 2008 domain controller, that's fine, but it is a new latest operating system domain controller, so it will definitely have some new classes and some new attributes which it is bringing with it. So you will have to upgrade the schema of your existing forest. Why you have to upgrade it? Just assume that there are 3 students, they work in a class, they are studying in a class, or they are working in a group. There are 3 people and they are working in a group, and all of them speaks English, and they're able to work with each other very nicely. Now the management says that we are going to bring 2 new workers to your organization, and these 2 new workers also speak French along with English. So what's going to happen? Of course you expect them to speak English to you, but the point is that sometimes they might even speak French. So at least you need to understand, or at least you need to have a dictionary in your back pocket from where you can look at the translation of those French words if these people ever speak French. So similarly, when you are putting new domain controllers of server 2012 in a server 2008 Active Directory, which has been so far server 2008, then you need to upgrade the schema of the existing Active Directory. So when such activities occur, which is again very rare, it's not that you are going to upgrade the schema every day. So that is the time when the schema master FSMO role owner domain controller should be available. Other than that, if you keep it off, if you keep it unavailable, nothing is going to change. Everything will function all right. Once again, what will happen if it is unavailable? Only needed for schema upgrades of any kind like Active Directory or Exchange or any other Active Directory integrated product. For the duration of months to year, you are not going to miss if schema master is not available. So domain naming master and schema master, forest-wide FSMO roles, which means there will be only one domain controller which can have domain naming master role, and there will be only one domain controller which can have schema master role in the whole forest, in the whole circle. Now, the domain-wide FSMO roles. Number 1 and the most important FSMO role of all is primary domain controller. We always use the word PDC, PDC, PDC. And this primary domain controller has become so common and so important for us that we keep using the word PDC everywhere. But PDC basically means a domain controller which has the primary domain controller role. So the DC with primary domain controller emulator role is the authoritative DC in the domain. So every domain, every triangle in a circle will have one PDC server. That is why this is a domain-wide role. The PDC emulator responds to authentication requests, change password, and manage group policy objects. The PDC emulator tells everyone else what the time is, and it's good to be PDC. Okay, so I told you there is a task of every FSMO role, schema master. It upgrades the schema. So whenever you are upgrading the schema, first of all, it will absorb all the schema. Once it has taken all the new schema in, it will replicate to all the other domain controllers. And then everybody else will have it. Similarly, domain naming master, it will first of all accept the new domain name which is getting created in the forest, and then it will update all the domain controllers in the forest that there is a new domain in our forest now. Okay. What does PDC do? PDC is a domain-wide FSMO role. It does 3 or 4 things. Number 1, it does the account lockout, or it is the password owner. What does that mean? There are 10 domain controllers or 15 domain controllers in your domain. You go ahead and reset your password. What will happen? The nearest domain controller to you, let's say you sit in Russia and your primary domain controller is in America. So what's going to happen is that when you try to reset your password, your request from your PC most likely go to your local domain controller, and your local domain controller will accept the request and will change the password. Okay, but what's going to happen is that it is immediately going to update the primary domain controller that I have changed the password of a person or an user account. Why? Because maybe you change the password on your own domain controller in Russia, or maybe it's not your password, but it is some account password which you changed in Russia domain controller. Now somebody from Brazil wants to use that same account, and you told him, yeah, I have resetted the password, this is the new password. He tries to use the password, and so far the replication hasn't happened. The password isn't being updated on all domain controllers. So what's going to happen? Suddenly, the Brazil person who is going to use the password, he will go to his local DC and he'll provide it the new password or the old password. But in whatever case, then the Brazil DC is yet not aware. So ultimately, if there are like 10, 15 domain controllers in your domain, there has to be one guy who is considered as the ultimate authority for the password. You tell all domain controllers that as soon as you reset a password, tell it to the pre-DC. And you tell all domain controllers that if you get a request for a password which does not match to the password what you have locally stored in yourself, then go to PDC and ask him for the latest password. If he also says that, yeah, my password is same as yours, then you can say the user that, your password is incorrect. But maybe the password is resetted and the local DC is not yet updated. So in those cases, PDC is the primary password owner and account lockout owner as well, because when you put wrong password multiple times, account lockout happen. When we will understand the password policy of Active Directory, you will know what is account lockout and these things. But you would have seen in your bank account and other places when you put your password 3 or 4 times or wrong time, basically your account get locked out. So this is called as account lockout. Now, there has to be one person or one domain controller who can say that my passwords are correct passwords, and if you don't have the correct password which is as per me, I will go ahead and lock out your account. So PDC is the primary account lockout owner and the password owner. Second, it is the primary timekeeper. The time on all the client PCs and the domain controller needs to be same. When I say time has to be same, let me tell you something. Look at this. It's 3:15 a.m. here. I go here. The time is 3:15 a.m. This is UTC. This is London time. Okay. What is the time here? If I go to my PC, the time is 13:15. That is 1:15 in the afternoon. And here, time on my PC is 13:19. Alright. So is this different time? This is 3:19 in London, UTC. And in Sydney here, it is 13:19. What do you reckon? Is the time different? It's not. Time zone is different. If I change it to Sydney time, the time becomes same. So guys, the time has to be same. Time zone can be different, but the time has to be same. If I go ahead and change this time manually to say 1:45, that means the time is different, and that cannot happen in Active Directory, because if there is a time difference between any client PC, any printer, any domain controller, then the authentication will stop. And this is an issue which you will see every now and then. The time on your client PC will become different, and when you will try to log in with the PC into the domain controller will not authenticate you. It will say that your time is incorrect. Did you see that? W32TM resync rediscover. This is a command which I ran, and it basically went ahead and updated its time from its time source. What is its time source? Let me show you something else. If you go to registry edit, if you go to system current control set, services, W32 time, look at this, type NT5DS. This means that it is following the hierarchy of the domain controller for the time source. NTP server is an external time source which is time.windows.com. This is a global website which is telling it, this server, the correct time. So although I resetted it manually to an incorrect time, this process would have happened automatically after a while, and it would have fixed the time. And this type which I want to show you, this is NT5DS. This type basically means that this server, which is part of a domain, is going to follow the domain hierarchy for time. And what is the domain hierarchy for time? All the client PCs, that is Windows 10, will go to their local domain controller to ask the time, and they will follow the time from the local domain controller. Whatever the domain controller says that this is the time, they will follow it. And all the local domain controllers will go to the primary domain controller of the domain to ask for the correct time. So if the primary domain controller says it is 10 p.m. in the night, all the local domain controller will believe it is 10 p.m. in night, and they will update their time. And all the client machines which are authenticating with the local domain controllers will also believe that it is 10 p.m. So far, we have not installed a new domain controller, an additional domain controller, rather, I should say. So, you may not be fully aware of the concept of the additional domain controllers and additional sites, but I hope you are getting a sense that you will have multiple domain controllers in a domain. All the responsibility will not be falling on a single domain controller. So that's what I'm talking about, the additional domain controller. Now these additional domain controller will go to the primary domain controller to update the time. And this is what is called as the domain time hierarchy. And that's what we are talking about here. That primary domain controller is the ultimate time owner. It is the guy who tells the correct time. And where does it get its time from? Well, it can get its time from itself as well if you do not want it to look outside. But in a typical situation, you will point it to an external NTP server like time.windows.com to get its time so that it can get time from an external source. It is also the primary group policy owner. So group policies, when we will study group policy, you will see that group policy also get replicated on multiple domain controllers. But when you try to edit the group policy, by default, the changes in group policy happen on the primary domain controller. And then as soon as the changes are saved, they get replicated to all the domain controllers. But it is the authoritative group policy owner. What happens if it will remain offline? Well, all these things which I have told you, especially time, you will figure out very soon. Account lockout, password resets, all these things will get affected. And I'm sure within initial few hours of a primary domain controller going offline, if not sooner than that, you will find out that it is offline by the virtue of an issue which a user will bring to you. So PDC is most important role. Red master. Again, a domain-wide role. The relative ID master assigns a block of security identifier to different DCs they can use for newly created object. Each object in Active Directory has a SID, a security identifier. The last few digits of SID are relative portion or RED. In order to keep multiple objects from having the same SID, the RED master grant each DC privilege of assigning certain SIDs. So what happens is, it's like a serial number. You have got 10 domain controllers. All domain controllers can go ahead and create object. You can go to the dsa.msc of any domain controller and you can say new user, new OU, new computer. You can go to any domain controller. Look here. It is right now connected to my PDC domain controller. If there were multiple domain controller here, I would have gone here and changed the domain controller and connected to another domain controller. Or by default, when you open this, it will open in the context on if you are in Russia, if you are in Sydney, if you are in Moscow, India. This will open the snap-in from its local domain controller. You will see the same structure everywhere because it is the same domain. And then you can go ahead and create an object here. But you have to believe that there is a delay in replication and an object created here. These are geographical distances which I am talking about. So everything will not be instantaneous. It will take a while for the information to get updated at other places. So whenever you are creating an object, it actually get assigned a serial number to it, right? That serial number is called as SID, Security Identifier. Now, that SID contains some common part in the beginning of it, and then there is a unique part at the end of it, and that is called as a RED. Read here. Each object in AD has a SID. The last few digits of SID are the relative portion. Now, because of the delay in replication and all these places, if you don't create some kind of a criteria, what's going to happen is that this domain controller can go ahead and create an object and assign it a SID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And another domain controller which is in Brazil can also go ahead and create an object with a serial number or a SID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Who is going to sort out these issues later? So the role of the RED master is that these last few relative digits, it basically gives all the domain controllers a range from time to time. This range is given in a block of 512. So the RED master actually goes ahead and give you the range, and then when you get the range, then you can keep creating your objects. When you finish the quota which is allocated to you, you ask for new RED, and once you get the new RED assignment, you can create further objects. So the role of this relative identity master is to give these blocks of RED to the domain controller so that when they create an object, they can assign it a unique SID, which is a combination of the initial part and the last portion, which is relative. And in that relative portion, you are getting it from a RED master. So there is going to be no chance that you can duplicate it because your quota has been allocated to you. When I say you, I mean the domain controller, and you will only use that quota to create an object. And you'll not create an object randomly and run into a problem where the object which you create has the same SID as an object which was created in another part of the world. What will happen if it is unavailable? RIDs are assigned in a block of 512. So until one of the DC in the domain runs out the RID pool, that it has created 512 objects and it has run out of the RID pool, you will not notice it is missing. So I've seen a few cases where RID master went missing or there was an issue. In those cases, what happens when the people try to create an object on a domain controller, a new user or something, it used to give a very clear error message that no RID are available for this object creation. So that error message quickly pointed out that there is some issue with the RID master. We figured out and we fixed it. So that's what is a RID master. Infrastructure master. Infrastructure master role translates globally unique identifier or GUID, SIDs, and distinguished names. I told you what is distinguished name, I told you what is SID, and GUID is again a globally unique ID. So SID is like local in a domain, GUID is global within the whole forest. It translates the GUID, SID, and distinguished name between domain. If you have multiple domains in your forest, that infrastructure master is the babblefish that lives between them. If infrastructure master doesn't do its job correctly, you will see SID in place of resolved names in your access control list. So what does infrastructure master do? Basically, when you have that big circle which we call forest, and then there are multiple triangles within it which we call as companies, and when people are between company A and company B are going to each other resources and accessing those resources, so what you will see is that you have created a group in the company A which is tagged to a particular resource, maybe a folder or a file share, and whoever need access to that group or to that file share, you basically add that person to that group, which we have done in past. Now let's say somebody from the other company need access to this folder. What you will do, you will add that person to your group, and you will be able to see that person because there is a trust between your domains. It could be a trust just because you are part of the same forest, so it's a default trust, or it could be a trust when you have created an inter-forest trust between two circles or two different companies altogether. But whatever is the reason, the trust exists, and you can add the other domain person in your group so that he can access the folder. So when you add anything like this, an external domain person into your domain resource, then something gets created which is called as the foreign security principle. I will quickly show this to you. If you remember, in our domain controller, there is something which is called as foreign security principle. These are some default foreign security principles which gets created, so don't worry much about them. But it is the job of the infrastructure master to maintain these foreign security principles. When people from outside your domain comes inside and access a resource in your domain, it is the role of the infrastructure master to maintain these forest security principles. Once again, you will learn about these things more as you grow further in your career, or you can read some more definitions and try to understand it. I know it's a complicated role among the other ones. So this is very important for such database to be maintained for various reasons, and it is the infrastructure master to maintain these forest security principles. What will happen if it is unavailable? Quite honestly speaking, if you have a single domain environment where there is only a circle and inside that circle there is one triangle which is your company, and there is no inter-domain relationships, then infrastructure master pretty much has no job in your environment. But as soon as you install your first domain controller, all these 5 roles gets created. Right now, you might not have noticed, but in our domain, we have just one domain controller, right? But we have all 5 roles. This is a very awesome command which you should remember, netdom query FSMO. Again, an interview question. How do you check what is the PDC server and what is the read master and what is the domain naming master in your domain? Very easy. Just run the command netdom query FSMO. It tells you who is the schema master, PDC. Who is the domain naming master, PDC. Who is the PDC, PDC. Who is the read pool manager, PDC. Who is the infrastructure master, PDC. So everybody is PDC. So this is what is the FSMO rules. Now global catalog. Global catalog is also a very important feature of Active Directory. Global catalog allows users and applications to find objects in Active Directory domain tree given one or more attribute of the target object. The global catalog contains partial replica of every naming context in the directory. Okay. Let me show you first of all that global catalog is also a domain controller, or basically any domain controller can be made a global catalog. How do we make a domain controller global catalog? We go to dssite.msc, which is Active Directory Sites and Services. We go to our site, we go to our domain controller, we go to its properties, and yeah, we go to actually an object inside it is called as NTDS settings, and we go to this object and we go to its property and we put a check on global catalog, because there is only one domain controller in our forest as of now, so that is why it is everything of our forest. Otherwise, when we will promote the second domain controller, you will see that it will by default not become the global catalog server, or during the promotion it will ask us whether you want to make it a global catalog server or not. So this is how you make a domain controller global catalog. Now what is a global catalog? So like I mentioned, that you can have a whole company, which is, let me open MS Paint here. Okay, I mentioned that this is our forest and these are our one domain, this is our two domain. These are all the companies which we have within our forest, okay? And these companies can be parent-child relationship, and or they can be tree root trust, like a sister relationship, sister domains. Now, these companies are supposed to know about each other. So a global catalog server is a domain controller which has a full copy of all the objects of itself. Like whatever users are there in this organization, he will know about all of them. Their name, their home address, their whatever attributes you are updated in the user's property, it knows about all of them. However, it will also know certain attributes about the users which are in other domains. Like the user who is here, 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 or users who are here, 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 or here, here, here. It will know about the users from these three domains as well. It will not know about everything about them. Like it will not have a copy of all the attributes of that user, but it will just know maybe their name, their telephone number, some important information. So global catalog is a database which is maintained on a domain controller, which we enable to be a global catalog server by going into the properties here and putting a check. And by becoming a global catalog, what happens is that it maintains a copy of all the objects which the server has on itself. Plus, it maintains a partial copy of all the Active Directory objects, not just user account, but all the Active Directory objects which are present in the forest. So it's basically a radio or a news station which keeps information about all other domains. And sometimes when you have to go to a property and let's say that a guy from here, you want to give him access on a group here. So how do you do that? You go to Active Directory users and computers, you go to your groups, you go to their property, you add a member. So if there had been a trusted domain in this forest, and if I would have gone to location, I would have seen the name of that forest here. I would have selected that forest and I would have wrote the name of the user there. Let's say Amit. I would write this name and I would do a check name. What is my domain controller going to do? It will ask a local global catalog server in this domain that, dude, do you know somebody called as Amit in that other domain? And the global catalog server would say, yeah, I know about him. And he will quickly provide the information about Amit, and my domain controller will resolve this information. So all these things are done in order to promote the speed at which the function will happen. So we'll go ahead and enable Amit, and we will give access to Amit to this domain. Alright, so that's what a global catalog do. Let me read the information again. A global catalog allows users and applications to find objects in Active Directory domain tree and given one or more attributes of the target object. The global catalog contains partial replica of every naming context in the directory. So all the domain, it will keep a partial replica. Make sense? There is a very good question which is being asked during the interviews, and that question is that, and this is a reality as well, that the infrastructure master role should never be on a domain controller which is a global catalog. Like what's happening here? Who is the infrastructure master in our domain? Who is the infrastructure master? PDC. And who is the global catalog server? PDC, right? PDC is the global catalog server as well. So the question is, why the infrastructure master and global catalog should not be on the same server? And the answer is, what is the role of infrastructure master? To maintain a copy of foreign security principles of the external users and groups which you have given permission in your domain. And what is the work of global catalog server? It keeps a partial replica of external users and computers on itself. So now, if you go ahead and create the global catalog server and infrastructure master on the same domain controller, what happens is that infrastructure master do not consider the foreign users as the foreign users, because it is already seeing a replica of them on itself, because it was a global catalog server. So global catalog server functions all right, but the infrastructure master stops doing its job. And when it stops doing a job, this foreign security principle section doesn't get updated. And as far as the domain controller itself is concerned, which has the global catalog server, it will have all the information on itself and it is fine. But the other domain controllers which are not global catalog server, they will not get the information about foreign security principles, because this folder stops getting updated because infrastructure master stopped doing its job, because infrastructure master believe these are not foreign users. These users are present on myself. I can see them here in the local directory. Okay, so that's the reason why infrastructure master and global catalog shouldn't be on the same server. Once again, interesting read. Go ahead, read more when you prepare for your interviews. This is a good question. Write it down, make a note of it, read more about it, understand more about it, and be ready for the interview. Alright, so next topic is what happens when a server dies with a FSMO role. So you have 5 domain controllers in your domain. There was, like in our case, the primary domain controller which was holding all the 5 FSMO roles. It crashed, its hard drive crashed, or it broke, or something happened to it. Then what can you do? Well, in an event that a domain controller with a certain FSMO role or all the FSMO roles dies, or maybe for any other reason that you want to move the FSMO role to another server, the process is quite easy. It is called as FSMO role transfer when the current role owner is alive, or FSMO role seizure where the current FSMO role is no more alive, or the server crashed. Both FSMO role and transfer and seizure can be done from GUI console, and it can also be done from NTDS util for the olden guys like myself, and then there is PowerShell as well. So how you do the FSMO role movement? So there used to be a command called as ntds util. Then you go to roles. Then you go to this, by putting the question mark, you can get the help from here. So basically there is a whole procedure which you follow, 5 or 6 command, and then you get this option to cease transfer domain naming master or PDC master or stuff role, or you can transfer it. So if the server which held the role is dead, then you need to seize it. If it is alive, then you can transfer it. The difference between seizure and transfer is that in case of transfer, it will try to tell the domain controller that I'm taking this role away from you and I'm giving it to another domain controller, so that everybody remains informed in the domain. But in case of seizure, it will perform the transfer. It will tell all the domain controllers that the transfer is happening except the domain controller from which you are taking it, because that domain controller is no more alive. So this is what is seizure or transfer. There is also options available from PowerShell, which is move AD directory. Okay, I need to exit out of it. Quit. Okay, so move AD directory server operation master role. Yeah, so this is a commandlet which is available where you can provide the identity of the target server, or you can, there is a whole commandlet which is available. I'll tell you more about PowerShell, how to use them. In fact, I'll use this opportunity. So you want to do this command and you don't know how to do it. So what we'll do is get -help. I want to do a module on PowerShell as well. So get help, move Active Directory, operation master role, example. Easy, that's PowerShell, you know. So, okay, it could not find the help file. So what I'll have to do is, we'll just quickly go to Google and figure out the syntax of it. Although in usual cases, I actually said no to the help download, so it didn't download the help. But ideally, I should have downloaded the help and then it would have given me an example of how to run the command. But I'll just open it quickly here. So google.com. I'll do it on my PC. Sorry guys, too much security on a Windows server. So we'll just go here and we'll just go here and we'll go to Google and we will say this command, and it tells us that these are here, and you will find so many articles here. So move Active Directory FSMO roles. This is the option and examples. So move Active Directory FSMO roles, identity, DC1, operation master, this. So this basically is saying that you have to move the FSMO role to this domain controller, and which FSMO role? PDC emulator. Or with this command, you can move all the FSMO roles. A PDC emulator, schema master. So this is moving 2 roles. You can put the name of all the roles here and it will go ahead and move it here. So once we have another domain controller in our forest, I will show you how to do all this. But as far as you are concerned, just Google all the ways. There is also a GUI way to do this, and I will just go here and yeah, operation masters. So you can go here and you can put the name of the other DC where you want to transfer it, and then you can say change. Right now we don't have any other domain controller, and we could have transferred the FSMO roles from here as well. Alright, so this is how you transfer the FSMO roles. You can do it from GUI, you can do it from PowerShell, you can do it from command prompt, ntds util. So all these ways are available to you. It's very easy, and like I said that it's pretty much very robust solution, Active Directory, so you won't face many issues with it. Alright, so here is what we covered in this module. We told you where is Active Directory stored, the Active Directory database. We showed you the three partitions of Active Directory. I also told you about the forest DNS zone and the the domain DNS zone, the two partitions, in total 5 partitions. I told you how to use ADSI edit to go through the partitions. I told you about Sysvol. I told you about all the 5 FSMO roles. I also explained you the forest wide roles and the domain wide roles. Then I told you how to transfer the FSMO roles. So that was all cool. Here's your action items. On your domain controller, launch ADSI edit. Connect to all 3 partitions like I showed you. Do netdom query FSMO to look at your FSMO roles. Use PowerShell to look at your FSMO roles. I didn't tell you how to look for FSMO roles via PowerShell. So what I'll do is I'll go here and I would give you some help. So I don't know what is the command to look for FSMO roles. So I would say get command FSMO. Okay, that doesn't strike anything. So this is how I do PowerShell. Operation master. Okay, so the only one which I get is get operation master role, the one which we saw. And what is the command to find? Okay, in case I'm not able to find the command from there, I will Google it. PowerShell get FSMO roles. So you quickly find some article. Okay, so this is how you get it. So you do it separately via for forest wide and domain wide roles. So this is the command which you run. So get AD domain, we will change it to rootdomain.com. Okay, it told me who is my infrastructure master, who is my PDC, and who is my red master. So that's how you query FSMO roles. So that's another lab. Then look at the content of your Sysvol folder and get more familiar with it, familiar with the structure, maybe read about it more. And look at the various events related to Active Directory in Event Viewer. So I don't know if you have been looking at Event Viewer, but just to show you, we get all kind of events. I've said you before as well. There is application services log, and these services and these special event viewer got created when you installed Active Directory on the server. So you can look at these events here. DFS replication, what is replicating our Sysvol. So there has a small change which has happened. Until Windows 2003, file replication service used to replicate the Sysvol. Then server 2008 onwards, there was a new service which was brought in, and that was called as DFS. The DFS was given as an option in server 2008 and 2008 R2 to replicate the Sysvol in place of file replication service, because this was a better solution to replicate the Sysvol contents. And server 2012 onwards, I reckon, or server 2016 onwards, I reckon it has been mandatory that you should replicate with DFS only. So now file replication service is not there anymore. Now DFS replication replicates the Sysvol. So this is the log of the DFS replication which is happening here. And it tells you about what's going on with your Sysvol share and the replication status and various things about it. So if the replication of your Sysvol share fail, if it is unable to replicate its content with the other shares, then it will show up here in the DFS replication. All right. So yeah, look at these event viewer things and study more about all the things which you have taught to you, and ask me questions, and I'll see you in the next